It's known throughout the higher level trafficking community that their leadership for their paramilitary wing are 4 former U.S. Special Forces. You've got a Green Beret, a Green Beret, that's Delta Force, 2 Navy SEALs, and a Ranger from the 75th Ranger Regiment. Those are the leaders.
Oh, man. Hold on. I'm from the 75th Ranger Regiment.
In a jaw-dropping revelation that's shocking the US to its core, America's most elite warriors have turned traitor. Green Berets, Delta Force, Navy SEALs, and Army Rangers, America's finest, are now leading cartels in Mexico. These highly trained killers, once sworn to protect the US, are now using their deadly skills to strengthen the cartels. With billions of dollars at their disposal, they've built a lethal army unlike anything seen before. But they're not just fighting, they're training cartel soldiers in advanced combat tactics, turning runners into an elite force capable of taking on anyone. Let's uncover the shocking details and what this means for America's war on drugs.
The Zeta killers. Well, he handled the money because he was a family member. They had the American Special Forces handle the actual building of their paramilitary. So they recruited former Mexican Special Forces, which is the next tier of leadership. Their main body is former Mexican military personnel, and then they bolster it with Special Forces from Central American countries. Honduras, El Salvador, Panama. These are all guys that come to the United States to get trained. They get trained by our guys at Bragg. They get trained at the School of the Americans in Georgia.
As 2025 looms, the war between the cartels and Trump grows more sinister by the day. But now, a chilling betrayal has emerged from the shadows. Elite U.S. military forces have gone rogue, joining forces with ruthless drug cartels. This unholy alliance between America's most lethal warriors and the world's most vicious criminals is a nightmare scenario, one that could determine whether Trump wins the war on the cartels or falls to their growing power.
That's what it's going to come down to, because I read an article earlier today that stated that the cartel is Mexico's 5th largest employer. At any given time, they're recruiting 230 personnel a day to help them smuggle drugs into the United States. That's a crazy amount. And to say that all of this is taking place without the Mexican government knowing this is a lie, right? Because you can't, like, you can't recruit that many people and not have eyes in the government, not have eyes in the military, right? And that's my biggest fear as I'm watching us get ready to go do this.
Former Delta Force, Navy SEALs, Green Berets, and Army Rangers, once the elite of the elite, have switched sides. These battle-hardened warriors, trained for high-stakes combat and undercover operations, are no longer fighting for America. Instead, they're fighting for the cartels. At the center of this nightmare is the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, also known as CJNG, and they're not just dealing drugs anymore, they're building an army.
Y según datos del INEGI, viven ahí poco más de 500 personas a bordo de camionetas rojas y blancas, vestidos con equipo táctico y armados. Hombres identificados como integrantes del cártel Jalisco Nueva Generación anunciaron su llegada a la localidad. En el material se logra ver un comando de cerca de 20 hombres descendiendo de vehículos y portando armas largas, algunos cubiertos del rostro y vestidos de negro o con elementos militares. Con música de fondo se logra escuchar que algunos de ellos gritan: "Ya llegamos a Volantín y no nos vamos", mientras alzan las armas que portan.
Leaked videos show armored convoys rolling through cartel strongholds, soldiers in full combat gear, and high-powered weapons. This isn't just a gang anymore, it's a war machine, and behind it all are former U.S. Special Forces, transforming CJNG into a hyper-lethal military force. These guys don't just know how to fight, they know how to win. We're talking military-grade armored vehicles, surface-to-air missiles, and anti-tank rockets. And now, America's most elite warriors are teaching them how to use them. This isn't just Mexico's problem anymore. Cartel influence is pouring across the border, with gangs like MS-13, Sureños, and Latin Kings linking up with the cartels, creating a criminal empire stretching deep into U.S. cities. But what's even worse is that the cartels are actively recruiting Americans. Social media is flooded with videos and posts glorifying cartel life, luring in young recruits who have no idea what they're walking into. Trump vowed to take down the cartels.
How are you going to utilize the military? You know, we know what the military can and can't do domestically, but in a scenario like this, how do you plan on using the military? Could they get involved in the violence if the cartels strike?
Yes, and we expect them to. But the Mexican military, President Trump's able to get Mexico to put military on their northern border. That will certainly help. I think the cartels would be foolish to take on the military, but we know they've taken on the Mexican military before. But now we have the United States military on the border. We got the men and women of the Border Patrol. Do I expect violence to escalate? Absolutely, because the cartels are making record amounts of money.
Now, America's own elite soldiers are fighting against him, and this war just took a dark turn.
The cartel TikTok hashtag on TikTok shows a lot of clips apparently showing off the lifestyle of cartel members. The videos appear to show trucks with stacks of white powder blocks or cars with secret compartments for drug smuggling. But the grim reality, the danger and violence of actual everyday life in the cartel are nowhere to be seen. This video, featuring members of the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, the main rival to the Sinaloa cartel, shows heavily armed gunmen in clown masks, patrolling and singing along to the radio.
This shocking alliance between former U.S. Special Forces and Mexican cartels didn't happen overnight. It's a story of corruption and betrayal that was decades in the making. It all started in the late 90s when the Gulf Cartel needed men to fight for them. So they did the unthinkable. They recruited soldiers, not just any soldiers, but deserters from Mexico's elite military units, men trained by U.S. and Israeli Special Forces. These rogue fighters eventually became Los Zetas, a death squad that transformed the cartel into a full-fledged war machine.
This is Los Zetas territory.
Yeah.
This is where they commit their crimes. Like if you want to go and do crime in El Paso, you're going to be dealing with La Linea, with the Juarez cartel folks and Barrio Azteca. If you want to do crime in Matamoros, you're dealing with the Gulf Cartel. If somebody's bringing drugs across the river in any of the Gulf Cartel territory, all the way from Boca Chica Beach, all the way up to about Zapata, Texas, you are in fact doing that with the Gulf Cartel. After Zapata, Texas on this way, you're dealing with Los Zetas. Once we get to Ciudad Acuña, it starts to change and different groups are operating. And that's just the way it is. It's just a fact of it.
As Los Zetas grew in power, their influence spread across the border. By 2010, reports surfaced of Sureño street gangs in California and South Carolina working with them. Soon, MS-13, the Mexican Mafia, and the Latin Kings were all linked to the cartels, creating a criminal empire that stretched deep into the US. Then, the cartels got even bolder. With billions in drug money, they began recruiting inside the US. This was when they turned to social media, glamorizing cartel life to attract young, desperate recruits.
What we've learned from law enforcement down here is that the big money maker for the cartels, it's not really trafficking drugs, but it's smuggling people. That's the cash cow. And it's dangerous. It happens every day down here on the border. And oftentimes it requires the help of young American citizens to pull off.
Mere weeks ago, Texas DPS made this bust in Laredo, where a human smuggling driver and passenger were arrested. Their ages, 15 and 14.
And law enforcement tells us that many of the human smugglers that they catch down here on the border, high school age U.S. citizens. And this is how they're recruited. Social media posts. These TikTok videos were found by Texas law enforcement, and they promise big bucks if you come down to the border and drive for the cartels. We have heard from Governor Ducey of Arizona, which is where we are right now. He says that he wants the social media companies to crack down on this type of content to help combat human smuggling.
But that wasn't the worst part. They started targeting former U.S. military personnel too, offering paychecks that made military salaries look like pocket change. They turned America's own warriors against it. The biggest gut punch came next. Mexico's own Special Ops Forces, trained by the U.S. Army's 7th Special Forces Group, defected to the cartels. These weren't just foot soldiers, they were the elite. Now, they were using their U.S.-trained skills to help the cartels fight back against the very governments that trained them.
They've been trained in military tactics to the standard that we would train our military forces that are deployed in Iraq, for example.
By 2025, the situation has spiraled out of control. The cartels have become so powerful, so well-trained, and so heavily armed that they can go toe-to-toe with actual military forces.
Like a lot of people were talking about, oh, we're gonna go in, we're gonna smash them, we have aircrafts, we have big bombs. I'm like, that's not how you win this war. Because to your point, you have to follow the money. You have to look at the government and how corrupt it is. You have to look at the money. You have to follow the money and see where it's going.
And now, the war isn't just coming to America, it's already here, with Trump's latest crackdown officially designating the cartels as terrorist organizations. He's declared all-out war, but with the US's top soldiers on the other side, the stakes have never been higher.
He's put the Mexican cartels on the foreign, designated them on the foreign terrorist watch list. So he's going to go to war with the cartels. You're going to need half the U.S. Army on those borders because the cartels are armed with teeth. I didn't realize he was going to do that. And he's talking about...
So is that to say that you think that can't be achieved because there's just so many of them and they're so powerful?
Achieved, but that is a major military concentration.
Now, let's talk about how powerful the CJNG have gotten with the help of U.S. elite soldiers fighting alongside them. The CJNG's military power has grown into a nightmare. Their arsenal is terrifying. Military-grade armored vehicles that can tank bullets and even some explosives. They've got surface-to-air missiles capable of shooting down military and civilian aircraft. And they're not stopping there. Rocket-propelled grenades, powerful enough to take out helicopters, are also in their hands. But it's not just about firepower. These guys fight like a well-trained army. Their special ops unit is no joke. Brutal training camps turn recruits into elite hitmen, allowing them to outsmart rival cartels and even government forces, leaving nothing but blood and fear in their wake. And just when you think it can't get any worse, they're using tech straight out of a war movie. Drones, not just for spying, but weaponized. Imagine a drone silently hovering, then dropping explosives on its target without warning. That's the new face of cartel warfare.
En Michoacán, la policía comunitaria de Tepalcatepec difundió videos de supuestos ataques del cártel Jalisco Nueva Generación realizados por un dron y bombas. En uno de estos videos aparecen al menos 4 camionetas en un camino de terracería. Los vehículos llevan personas en la parte de atrás. Ahí está, vea. Un momento después se aprecian las explosiones y las camionetas huyen. En otro material, el ataque es contra un campamento hecho con madera y plásticos. Allí se observa a 2 hombres que salen gateando por las explosiones. Vamos a ver, ahí, vean nada más esa...
Their power doesn't come from guns and bombs alone. They've mastered corruption, buying off cops and politicians while planting their people deep inside law enforcement. How do you fight back when the enemy is wearing a police uniform? You can't tell who's on your side. The CJNG isn't just Mexico's problem anymore. They're everywhere. North and South America, Europe, Asia, Australia. They control huge parts of the drug trade and run international crime networks. This isn't just a cartel, it's a global criminal empire, and they rule through pure fear. Public executions, torture videos, even cannibalism in their training camps. It's psychological warfare designed to paralyze anyone who dares to stand in their way. Their message is clear. They're not afraid of the government. They flaunt their firepower in videos. Uniformed troops, military-grade weapons, even tanks. It's a declaration of war, right out in the open.
Mexico is on pace for another year of record violence. In the first 6 months of 2020, there were 17,439 murders, up almost 2% from the same time last year. Helping to fuel that uptick in violence is the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, or CJNG.
Tú ya sabes con quién traes la bronca. Para que sepas, aquí seguimos buscándote y no quitaremos el dedo del renglón.
The revelation that former Delta Force, Navy SEALs, and other elite U.S. military operatives are leading the CJNG changes everything about America's fight against the cartels. This isn't just about drugs anymore. It's about facing a military force that knows every trick in the U.S. playbook. With elite U.S. soldiers at the helm, the CJNG can pull off precision strikes and coordinated ambushes that are just as good, if not better, than what American Special Forces can do.
Once again, one of the officers on the base called and tipped off his handler. Mencho and his men got into their SUVs and they were taking off. Here come the helicopters. They can see the caravan. They get into formations. They start descending. What happens? They start blowing helicopters out of the sky. They have SA-7s. They have man-bats. They've demonstrated the capacity to blow military helicopters out of the sky. Every one of the special forces on those helicopters died.
Trump's administration has been talking tough about taking on the cartels, even saying they'll unleash the full might of the U.S. Army.
I will deploy all necessary military assets, including the U.S. Navy, to impose the full naval embargo on the cartels. I did that before and it worked. What we did was incredible. We will guarantee that the waters of the Western Hemisphere are not used to traffic illicit drugs to our country.
Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth wants to launch precision strikes like the ones used against terrorists overseas. But here's the problem. These cartel leaders know U.S. tactics inside and out. They were trained by the best. They could see American operations coming and hit back hard, turning any U.S. assault into a bloodbath. This changes the game completely. Taking on the CJNG isn't just about sending in troops or drones. It's about fighting an enemy that thinks like the U.S. military, because they used to be the U.S. military. They can anticipate moves, counter strategies, and set up devastating ambushes.
So when you're talking about having military troops coming into the United States, if you're partnering with the Mexican government, how do you know that information is not going to get leaked? So when our men are going on their missions, they don't have the element of surprise. Their air assaults, they're dropping into ambushes planned by American Special Forces, supported by Mexican Special Forces. Twice the Mexican government has sent their special forces to try to get Mencho. On both times they got tipped off. On the ground assault, those soldiers went right into the ambush. They unalived every one of the Mexicans and left their bodies on the highway.
And if Trump does go after the cartels, like he says he will, it could trigger something even worse: retaliation on American soil. With their advanced tech and military training, the CJNG could hit U.S. border patrols, law enforcement, or even civilian targets. Imagine weaponized drones striking U.S. cities. It would be chaos, and it would give Trump all the justification he needs to escalate this into an all-out war. But there's also another problem. If Trump goes to war with the CJNG, it could destroy U.S.-Mexico relations. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum won't tolerate American forces attacking on Mexican soil. It would be seen as a violation of their sovereignty, sparking chaos, maybe even destabilizing the entire region. This isn't just about fighting a cartel anymore. It's about battling an enemy that knows America's tactics better than anyone, an enemy that could strike back at home, and an enemy that could drag the U.S. into a war it never saw coming.
If there are foreign terrorists that he's designated, then he has a right to cross that border. In other words, he can go to war with these people on Mexican soil. And of course, the new president of Mexico may have something to say about that. So he's really sort of pushed himself, and and he's talking about taking back the Panama Canal. The last time we were going to take back the Panama Canal, just before Jimmy Carter gave it away, the president of Panama was going to blow it up.
Today, America is teetering on the edge of an all-out war, one that will either destroy the cartels forever or drag the U.S. into a nightmare it may never escape. Trump's war on the cartels has forced a reckoning. Former U.S. Special Forces, some of the most elite soldiers ever trained, have turned against their country, building a cartel army unlike anything seen before. They wield military-grade weapons, execute precision strikes, and control a vast empire of violence that stretches across the globe.
So this all comes as there were 2 reported cross-border shootings earlier this week, namely in Fronton, Texas. That's in the Rio Grande Valley sector, where Border Patrol actually exchanged gunfire with suspected cartel members. That video that you're looking at, that's the Mexican military response after the incident took place. Now, Blake, we also just got our hands on a memo out of the Rio Grande Valley sector that actually says that, this is kind of crazy here, that the cartels authorized the use of weaponized drones, explosives against CBP personnel and U.S. law enforcement down there at the southern border.
If Trump wins, the fight won't just be another crackdown. It will be total annihilation. Precision drone strikes, special forces raids, and relentless military operations could wipe the cartels off the map. Their leaders will be hunted down, their strongholds obliterated, and their armies dismantled piece by piece. This could be the final stand, the moment the cartel nightmare ends forever. But if Trump loses, then it might already be too late. The cartels will grow bolder, stronger, and more ruthless than ever before. Their soldiers, trained by defected U.S. operatives, will become an unstoppable force, striking with military precision. The southern border will become a war zone, and cartel terror will seep into American cities like a disease. Bombings, assassinations, and mass killings won't just be a warning. They'll be the new normal. One path leads to victory, the other leads to chaos, bloodshed, and a war America will never escape. The question is, who will win?
In the past few years, his cartel has grown from this ragtag group of gunmen in pickup trucks into this powerful paramilitary force with high-powered weapons and armored vehicles.
Well, Kelly, this week's morbid find of a severed leg dangling off a bridge is just among a string of recent incidents involving body parts.
What are your thoughts? If elite U.S. soldiers are fighting for the cartels, how do we know who we can really trust? If Trump launches a full-scale war on the cartels, will it finally bring peace or drag the U.S. into an unwinnable war?
Yeah, I think the only way this succeeds is by whiffing through the Mexican government, right? Like, I think that's the only way this actually works. If we go in there and beat our chests and say, hey, we're America, we're here to fix this problem, and we don't have the government's buy-in, like, yeah, we're going to be over there doing exactly what we did in Iraq and Afghanistan.
Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you're always the first to know about the latest updates and insider cartel stories.